episode of Book Report Podcast.
Explaining things to Bryce.
Ricky Ricardo and the Babalu Gang.
The Ringo of the Rat Pack.
Zorro means fox.
Audible air quotes.
Stephanie teaches us to whistle.
And much, much more.
Live from Pennsylvania, this is Book Reports Podcast! A monthly podcast of high literary discussion and lowbrow humor. My name is Bryce Diener.
And I'm Sam Tyler.
And our special guest this week is Stephanie Hines. Welcome, Stephanie.
Hello, thank you.
Hey, welcome. Happy to have you here.
Yeah, thanks a lot for coming along.
Yeah. I'm still deciding if I'm happy to be here, but thank you.
Preparing for this podcast, I asked you what your job was, because I knew you were a professor. You told me you are a professor of communications, public relations, advertising, and speech. My question is, are there any jobs available at your college? Because you seem to be just sweeping them all up at this point.
Ironically enough, my contract isn't renewed, so I'm out of a job at the end of next month.
Which means college is going to have to shut down.
So apply for a job you'll probably get when there's so many of them open. Yeah.
That's right.
So what books do you tend to enjoy reading?
I enjoy, brace yourselves, because this is going to come as a huge shocker, romantic Christian fiction.
So what do you enjoy about Christian romance fiction, and what specifically makes it Christian romance?
Well, there's always going to be some kind of element of Bible verses, or the main character's name is from the Bible, and that has a lot to do with her history. But other things that I really like about the Christian genre is you're not going to get all that filth.
Okay.
If you're looking for a romance story, it's still like...
On the cover of those Christian novels, is it a shirtless man, but he's behind a bush, so you can only see his neck up? The book I chose to read for this month is called The Rat Pack, Neon Nights with the Kings of Cool.
Oh, man, I can't decide which part of that title's better.
Probably the author's name, which was Lawrence Quirk and William Scholl.
And Bryce, I gotta say, I am very jealous that you read this book, because I love going to library book sales. I went to a book sale, I told Bryce about it, and then after I left the book sale, Bryce went to it and found this book. Bought it, and I'm insanely jealous that he bought it instead of me. This book is absolutely right up my alley. Fascinating story.
So the name actually is really interesting, kind of gross. There was a huge party at a nightclub, and in the VIP section they thought, gee, you know what would be cool if we put a rat in a cage on each table. Somehow all the rats got out and decided to go down into the general populace and pretty much scared everyone out of the nightclub, and it looked like a pack of rats. And then when all the VIPs left, they went back to Humphrey Bogart's, and they were all partying like crazy, and his wife at the time, Lauren Bacall, actually was later...
Should have read this book.
Frank Sinatra's wife.
Really?
I believe so.
I know she married John Huston, but it was where she married Frank Sinatra.
Or they were very interested in each other. They kind of dated behind Humphrey Bogart's back. Scandal. Mm-hmm. I hope you're sitting down when you read this book, because...
And listen to the podcast.
Instead of my long walks as I read books on the highway. That bad habit of mine. Get off the road, Ryan. Hey, is that a book about the Rat Pack, fella? I love that, Martin.
So Lauren Bacall said, you guys look like a pack of rats. And because they were drunk, they thought it was hilarious. And so they called themselves the original Rat Pack, which was Humphrey Bogart's Rat Pack. After Humphrey Bogart had died, Frank's like, let's keep the party going. And so he kind of created his own Rat Pack at his own house. Let's play a quick fun game. Can you name who is still alive of the Rat Pack? Trick question, they're all dead. Wasn't that fun?
Really?
That was a fun game.
Yeah.
Great.
That was a really fun game. Thanks.
So we'll go through just a quick intro of each of these guys. So Frank Sinatra, kind of the
chairman of the board.
Yeah, the chairman of the board, as he was called. Thank you for reading this book for me.
You're welcome.
So I didn't have to talk. He really just led this group. What I found was interesting, I really didn't know anything about the Rat Pack other than they were singers. I could have definitely named Frank Sinatra and Dino before this book, but I didn't know who Peter Lawford or Joey Bishop was. I knew Sammy Davis Jr. existed, but I guess I didn't understand that he was actually part of the group. So it was neat learning how they all met. I never understood that they were actually movie stars and TV stars beforehand. So that was really neat to know, like, they were doing movies together, and that's how they kind of met pretty much everybody, or they met in nightclubs. And that's how Frank Sinatra actually met Sammy Davis Jr. when Sammy Davis Jr. was much younger, and Frank Sinatra was just an up-and-coming star. He was amazed by Sammy Davis's voice and his ability to dance on stage, and it was a time when there's discrimination between African Americans and other races.
Well, and even more so, he's African American and Jewish.
Absolutely. And so people really didn't like him, even though he was a good performer. There was one club that allowed him to perform there, but they would not allow him to sit and enjoy along with the audience any other performances because he was black. And it's interesting that Frank Sinatra never treated him differently than any of the members of the Rat Pack because of his race. And I always found that interesting that, Frank Sinatra, he saw the talent that Sammy Davis Jr. had, heard his voice, and it's like, this kid has talent. It doesn't matter what he looks like or what his background is. And I thought that was just made Frank Sinatra a stand-up guy, which this book doesn't really put a lot of good things in the column of Frank Sinatra did good things.
That is very true. I did kind of want to ask you about that. The Rat Pack kind of exists halfway in the world of hilarious hijinks and mafia and substance abuse.
Yeah.
Where's the tone of this book between those two poles?
So they definitely mention, especially with Frank Sinatra, his connection with the mafia because he's coming up in Vegas. He owned part of the Sands Hotel. But whenever anyone tried to bring up the mafia to him or his connection with him, he would just storm off. He'd get angry at them. He'd say, I've never done anything illegal with these guys. Quit bugging me about it. But the book really played it off in the sense he never had any illegal dealings personally.
Okay.
That's the way the book puts it. There's certain things, I've heard that when the Rat Pack would perform, they made Sammy Davis come through the backstage, whereas these guys were allowed to walk through the front. They never mentioned that particularly in this book. So, but I'm sure there are things that these authors have left out.
Okay, it just kind of made me wonder because Vegas in the 50s and 60s,
right.
And it is just mafia at that point in time.
I'd say the second chairman of the board, the chairette of the board, you could say?
The cherry of the board.
The cherry of the board. Was Dean Martin. They kind of go into his history a lot. They said before surgery he had a giant nose, and even after surgery he still had a giant nose, so it really didn't do much for him. But he definitely had this I don't care sort of attitude, regardless of what was happening, whether there was drunkenness or whether there was mafia guys showing up trying to get their way. He was so blasé about everything. Now, there was one thing about Dean Martin he definitely showed emotion for, and that was Dean Martin. When he had a favorite restaurant, and he would bring his own recordings there, and he would go to the owner and say, hey, turn off whatever junk music this is, and play my records.
Oh, that's
and they would do it, because, at that point, he was the
funny.
famous Dean Martin.
Right.
And so he was able to do that.
Oh, that's funny.
I touched on Sammy Davis Jr. a bit. The book definitely talks about his past, about performing with his father and his uncle as a trio, and he kind of always stole the stage. And even back then, there were laws that children couldn't perform. He was 10 to 12. So there were some states that they couldn't do that, and they told the people who would book it that he was a midget or a dwarf. And I guess they got away with it. He performed. It also talked about how Sammy Davis Jr. was really almost like a civil rights icon that never really gets mentioned. There'd be clubs where it'd be we won't let you into this club because of the color of your skin. I'm Sammy Davis Jr. If you ever want me or my friends, the Rat Pack, of any of them, to perform here, you're going to let me in this club. Welcome to the club! and so he really was the first African-American in these places, not as a performer, but as a guest of these clubs and stuff. And so he really broke that race barrier for New York City especially. And I thought that was really cool just to see that. Peter Lawford, one of the B-list of the Rat Pack, he was the oldest of the Rat Pack by 10 years. One of the main reasons he became famous was he married a woman named Patricia Kennedy of the John and Bobby and Ted Kennedy fame. I don't know if you've heard of them.
Yeah, if you were going to bring up the Kennedys, I was going to in a question later. Yeah. But finish your statement. I do have a question about the Kennedys coming up.
So I was just going to say, I really think that's the only thing that brought him above, because Frank Sinatra wanted to be surrounded by powerful people, which is why he was friends with the mafia. But he kept Peter Lawford around for so long because he was a Kennedy-in-law. And the only thing that separated them, and it mentions this in the book, is that John F. Kennedy, while he was president, was going to fly out, stay in Los Angeles for a while. So Frank Sinatra's he can stay at my house because, I'm friends with your brother-in-law. So he built a helicopter pad in his yard, threw tons of thousands of dollars into his home, built it up. And I think there was a huge fight at that point between Peter Lawford and his wife. They eventually were going to get a divorce. So John's I'm not going to stay there.
Oh.
So he stayed at Bing Crosby's house.
Why not?
This book just drops names like it's loose change.
It would be a lot more fun to stay at Bing Crosby's house than Frank Sinatra's. Just saying.
And so Frank Sinatra has a helicopter pad in his...
The Marine one never used it.
Yeah. And because of that, he took it out on Peter Lawford. They never spoke again until Frank Sinatra Jr. was kidnapped. What were you going to ask?
Kennedy is tangentially connected to Frank Sinatra in a few very seedy ways, linked by the mafia. Yeah. And I was kind of wondering...
And I believe Marilyn Monroe.
In fact,
unofficially.
They're only dating. They're only dating, folks. Kennedy is our most rat-packy president. It's the time period. It's substance abuse, womanizing. It's mafia connections. Did Kennedy ever show up in the book? Did they talk about the interactions he had with Frank Sinatra?
They didn't really... The Rat Packers definitely stumped for Kennedy. Hey, you need to go out there and vote for this guy. He's pretty great. So they met him at parties. One thing about it, which was really sad, Sammy Davis Jr. was one of his huge supporters, like probably more than any of the Rat Packers. John had to have Bobby tell him the day before the inauguration, Sammy, you can't sit on stage because of the color of your skin. And Sammy was crushed, and he's like, I can't support him anymore. Yeah, so it really just showed the character of John Kennedy a little bit, especially making his brother Bobby do it. Like he couldn't just man up and say, you can't do this. As far as Sammy Davis Jr. had come, there were still barriers that he wasn't able to break through.
Okay.
And the final...
Does Joey Bishop really require an explanation, Bryce? I don't know.
And the last one was Joey Bishop, so that's the
there you go,
yeah. It really doesn't mention Joey Bishop. He is the least mentioned. He is the most mundane, boring one. He... doesn't really...
Although, to be fair, if you're the most boring member of the Rat Pack, that's that's really a high bar.
That's like being the fifth member to the Beatles. You were still a part of the Beatles.
You're still a Beatle. Yeah, you still get the commemorative coin.
So the Ringo of the Rat Pack, Joey Bishop, he didn't really booze that much. He didn't womanize all that much. Ringo of the Rat Pack.
So in this book, what did you enjoy the most? Was it the history of it? Was it the tone?
It was really neat. Just I'm not one of those people that enjoys the old time movies like black and white and stuff like that. So a lot of these names were kind of lost to me. I think Sam is definitely a book you would have enjoyed. It's a shame you didn't pick it up at the library.
Thanks.
I saved a snippet. In 1960, Frank and the Rat Pack were the epitome of cool. Men wanted to be like them, live like them, make love like them, and they wanted to stay out all night like they did, bed a different broad whenever they felt like it, and never fear any consequences. They wanted to smoke and drink until it made them sick, throw money around like it was meaningless, and feel like irresponsible, irrepressible college boys again. In some ways, the Rat Packers were the ultimate symbols of Arrested Development. In others, they were the ultimate party boys. Their message, life was to be enjoyed, and only a square would say nay. And I thought that's a great way to summarize the whole life of the Rat Pack. And it was just neat to, I've never drank alcohol. I don't really go out and party like crazy. So it was neat to almost live vicariously through these guys just to see, wow, this is crazy. And also, I'm glad I don't do that because they make some pretty poor decisions.
Right.
One question I want to ask you guys is, do you think that nowadays a group like the Rat Pack could still make those choices, still make those decisions, and still be popular? Like it was mentioned that men wanted to be like them, spend money like them, drink and smoke like these guys, and treat women like they were objects.
I think as you were reading that, I was thinking, how is this different from nowadays?
Really? Okay.
Yeah, that was my first thought as you were going, the 60s. Pff, you're talking 2017.
Right.
That people think that that's what an ideal standard or a great standard of a person is. And it's I witnessed a couple different people not hooking up in the sense of hooking up. You can't see my air quotes, but I'm air quoting hooking up.
Come closer to the mic so we can hear them.
It's you just met this person. How pathetic and sad is this?
Yeah.
So as you were reading that, that's what I was thinking about. Modern day.
I think they would definitely have the greatest reality TV show now.
Oh, yeah.
100%, to just follow these guys around.
Real Rat Packs of Beverly Hills.
Well, yeah, exactly. Imagine the guest celebrities. Back in the Rat Pack day, they would crash each other's concerts. If you went to a concert of Frank Sinatra, you would see, Dean Martin jump on stage and sing a song with him. You'd see Sammy Davis Jr. come out. They crashed other people's concerts and would perform at other people's concerts all the time. It would be the best Twitter feeds, the best reality TV shows, and I do want a T-shirt that says only a square would say nay. I think
that's pretty great.
I think that's essential.
If we ever get a T-shirt store,
it's happening.
Become popular. Yeah. Only a square says nay.
Yeah, but we would make one with a different Rat Pack's face on each one, and Joey Bishop would be, I'm sure, the big seller. Pretty sure.
We'll put him on the back. I wasn't sure if I was going to mention this. Kind of like that mafia connection going back to that. And it talks about how violent Frank Sinatra got. Because he definitely was a man with a short fuse.
Okay.
he was not known to be a patient person. I'll just start here. By far the most infamous account of Sinatra's belligerence had to do with a deputy sheriff named Richard E. Anderson. Anderson's wife had once been involved with Sinatra, but now she was working as a cocktail waitress at the casino Sinatra co-owned in Lake Tahoe. When Anderson came to pick his wife up one night at the casino, he and Sinatra got into an argument and came to blows. Without any of his hired muscle or mob buddies to back him up, Sinatra came out the loser and was so injured he couldn't do his stage show for several days. Whew. Members of the casino staff heard Sinatra screaming at Anderson that he'd get even with him no matter what it took. He contacted the sheriff's office and got Anderson suspended. About 2 weeks later, Anderson was killed in a suspicious automobile accident. He was run off the road by a convertible that sped off after the accident.
Oh, my goodness.
Wow.
But at least Frank Sinatra was nice to Sammy Davis Jr.
That's right. If there's one silver lining to Frank Sinatra,
Frank Sinatra's murderous friends.
It's that creamy voice and a friend of friends.
Well, that is kind of the weird juxtaposition of the Rat Pack is it does have that living for life attitude combined with all the awful infrastructure that the mafia connections, the substance abuse, and so on is all the darkness that kind of hides behind everything we think of about the naive 50s and the dawning revolution of the 60s. All that stuff kind of built it up.
They mentioned he didn't have his muscle with him. If he wasn't surrounded by his bodyguards or if he didn't have his friends around, he didn't really want to be tough. But as long as he had his bodyguards, he could be like, yeah, what are you going to do? And they'd see his bodyguards and they'd back up. There was one point he was in a diner, and who does he see? I hope you're sitting down, listeners. Lucille Ball and Desi Arnaz. And Desi Arnaz and Frank Sinatra get into an argument. Uh-huh. Frank Sinatra doesn't have his bodyguards with him. Desi Arnaz does. And so Frank's like, I wanted to be the better man, so I backed down. It wasn't the fact that he was outnumbered by Ricky Ricardo and the Babalu gang. So Frank always kind of played it that he would be the tough guy if he had the upper hand. It was a good book all around.
Well, I wish I'd read it. Sounds like a great book.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that because after reading this, I decided I've had a lot of fun picking on you for getting this book. But because we're friends, like Frank Sinatra was to Sammy Davis Jr.,
I'm the one-eyed Jew black man in this relationship.
Your name is Sam. So from Frank to Sam, this book is now yours.
Oh, thanks, Bryce.
Enjoy it.
I appreciate it. I'll enjoy that. Well, thanks. I'll enjoy that. Actually, I'm not even going to do my book now. I'm just going to sit here and read this.
Okay.
If you don't mind. So, Stephanie, what was the book that you read for this month?
The book I chose to read, Woodlands, part of the Glenbrooke Series. It's number 7 in the Glenbrooke Series.
I've only read the first 5. Sorry.
So what's the series about?
Kind of a piggyback off of a different series. It's by Robin Jones Gunn. When I learned to love to read, I always watched my mom loving to read. Like, that's what she did. She'd fall asleep every night. She wouldn't watch TV. She was reading a book. She was on the couch. It was 8 o'clock. She was reading and falling asleep. But I just loved to watch her read. That was interesting. So when I was about 14, she got me this series of books called the Christy Miller series by Robin Jones Gunn. I read all of them in probably like 3 weeks. And there was 10 of them. But I could really identify with the character. She was like right around my age, had some interesting things that were happening in her life. And then they followed up. After that series ended, there was Christy Miller, The College Years. Like Saved by the Bell, The College Years.
Okay.
Yeah. So The College Years series. Right. And they were good. They weren't great, but they were good. In that section, there were different characters that were Christy's friends that she met. And in some of the earlier series too. And so then from there, those characters decided to get they all met and said, we need to have our own series. Robin Jones Gunn, you need to write each one of us our own book. So that's the Glenbrooke series. And each one of these random characters that you learned about in the Christy Miller series has their own book. Does that make sense? Why do you look so confused?
I'm trying to follow
along. Each book in the
here.
series focuses on a different character from this other series. Oh, that's a clever way to do it. It's expanded universe.
So it's like grandchildren or something, right?
Think about it more like Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them.
Okay, sure. I'm on board.
I'm not on that one, but okay.
Yeah.
I completely understand.
Imagine if Goyle and Crabbe had their own book, and then we did another one for somebody from Hufflepuff that isn't Diggory. You'd be fine. That's how it works. Yeah.
If you need me to understand something
related to Harry Potter terms, it'll be fine.
I'm on board.
Okay. So this one is about a girl named Leah Hudson, mid-20s. In the beginning of the book here, you have this option.
Oh, nice. That's cool.
It is Visitor's Guide to Glenbrooke. Glenbrooke is in Oregon.
There's the Arby's.
Yeah, we're seeing a 2-page map spread at the front of a novel, which is
with
pretty
a giant
impressive.
compass rose that I hope isn't actually in that field, because what a waste of space. They could have put a crop there.
So in this book, if you look and you see there's different people's houses, like Hidden House Bed and Breakfast, Brad and Alyssa's house. And here, what does this say up here in the corner?
Well,
Seth and Leah's cabin.
And who's the book about?
It's about Leah.
Glenbrooke, I believe.
It's about Leah, this single girl.
Maybe they're co-owners.
A B&B?
Yeah.
No.
So there's a spoiler at the front.
Okay. Yes, there's a spoiler at the front. And I've read this book a lot. And out of all the books in the Glenbrooke series, this one's my favorite, and I kept coming back to it because I really identified with Leah.
Now, is Leah the one you identified from the original series?
No.
Okay.
No, she was only mentioned once in the original series. It was random, like out of everybody that they had mentioned, why did they pick Leah to do this storyline of? But I appreciate it.
Because he ran out of characters.
Yeah. There you go.
No, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Okay.
But you're saying you do like Leah because of this book?
I like Leah because I identify with her.
Okay.
Yes. She is a single woman who owns a house. Well, I run an apartment, but I own 2 cats.
Like a house.
What else do I want to tell you guys about this book?
Well, I'd like to know what about Leah besides, a single woman owning a home? Is there anything else, like character-wise, that reminds you of yourself?
Yes. She never thinks that she's good enough for anybody. Okay. All of her friends are married, and she's very independent, very strong. She took care of her family. She lives in a place where she doesn't have any family. I live in a place where, blood-wise, I don't have any family around here. And that she just loves to do stuff for people. She is known as the Glenbrooke Zorro.
Wow. Okay.
Because she runs around carving her initials and everything in sight. It's really rough.
That was a Z pattern there. Okay.
I believe Zorro is fox in Spanish for all of our Espanol. But I remember back in high school, in Spanish class, only 2 of us showed up to class one day for whatever reason, and our Spanish teacher was like, we're going to play Spanish Scrabble. And so me, being a D student, did words like day and see. And I remember my teacher played Zorro, and I was like, you can't play that. That's a show. And she's like, no, that means fox. And that's the only thing I learned in Spanish that year.
To be fair, if I was your Spanish teacher and I was playing Scrabble with you, I would make up Spanish words too. I mean, I would.
So, the Glenbrooke Zorro.
Yeah, why?
And what that means is that she likes to learn about folks who need help. Families that might have trouble making their paychecks meet week to week or whatever. And so then she'll go to the grocery store, she'll buy like families that need diapers, and so she'll buy diapers and some goods and whatever. And then drop them off on the door, ring doorbell, and run and hide into her car. She'll watch then the family, or whoever it is that opens the door to get the thing, and they're always like, who's there?
So I'm curious, how does Seth play a role in this? Okay. Who is he? Is he mentioned earlier? And why does he get a cabin with Leah?
Yes. He is not mentioned any earlier.
Okay.
In the very first chapter of the book, Leah's helping out at the Little League concession stand because she does everything for everybody because she can, and she's considered, as that single person that you're good to help out with everything. She's helping out at this concession stand, and she sees this guy that's standing across the parking lot, and he's like watching her but watching the game, and she's like, I've never seen this guy before, and he's really tan for it being Oregon. And so she's a little bit intrigued by him, and then all of a sudden the game's over and she gets like thousands of kids coming and hollering at her for different food things, and the door opens and there comes this guy that walks in and is like, hey kids, whistle. I can't do it, and like the
yes, that
we'll add that in post production.
No, we're leaving that noise in.
Hey kids. Yes, Seth, you whistled. Listen up, everybody.
Hey, taxi.
Hey, there's a pretty lady. I think I'll whistle at her. We're the most fans.
Let me do a couple bird calls for you.
I believe this is the New England Warbler.
Yep. Oh, is that an owl?
This is the blue-footed chickadee. Okay.
Not enough of that.
Okay.
So he comes in and he helps her out.
Okay.
And she's like, who's this guy? She didn't even get his name or anything. So she's talking to some of her friends, and they know him because he's the nephew of this guy that's like been an institution in the town forever. Okay. He just came back from Costa Rica. Ding, 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 hence the tan.
Oh, okay.
Yes. So they go about their life. He starts actually kind of courting her. And her being this really strong, independent woman, she doesn't know how to handle the attention. She's never dated in her whole life. So when they start dating, she doesn't know how to handle the attention because she's never had that kind of attention from a guy in that manner. Whatever it is, stuff that's going on in her life, she just starts bawling every time they're together. But he says something along the lines of, it's okay to cry because that's just washing the windows to your soul. I was like, wow, that's really interesting. You can laugh. Go ahead. I thought it was sweet. Again, you asked a female.
I can find something sweet and funny at the same time.
Okay.
Is there like an antagonist? Is there like another woman that tries to steal Seth maybe? Or that doesn't
No, there's another man. Because he's an attorney and he's schmarmy.
Is he set up as an antagonist, or is he more of a villain? Because saying he's swarmy, so just kind of wonder: is he obviously unlikable, or is there a chance for her to go for either guy?
There is a chance for her to go for either guy.
Okay.
Because she is informed by this schwarmy guy that Seth is not so much of an outstanding character as he's been presenting himself to be.
He's a drug lord. And I work for the DEA.
Yep. So then Leah's kind of like, oh, I'm intrigued by this other guy. I've known him, like she knew him her whole life. He goes to California, becomes this big shot attorney, comes back, and then is like, I need to represent you in this case that you're going to have, and so you just need to read it.
Right. There's something that I kind of notice in telling romantic stories. There's pretty much the same arc, which is meeting, initial friction / dating, and then the real courtship where they're obviously together. Just a question of when are they going to get married. What is the ratio of meeting each other, actually dating seriously in a relationship, and marriage for the book?
While the map at the beginning is deceptive because it says that it's Leah and Seth's cabin.
That's a map for the series, not the book.
Right, it's for the whole series. It's a little deceptive. Because by the end of the book, they're not married. They're together and they're seriously talking about marriage.
Okay.
But they didn't get married.
So this is then are they going to start courtship story as opposed to a courtship story?
No, they do court.
Oh, okay.
It's not an are they going to. The big thing that brings them together is, remember how I mentioned he was the nephew of, like, patriarch person of the family, or of the town? That guy dies. The reading of the will happens, and again, spoiler alert.
He left her the whole town.
Well, originally he had. Originally he did. But then when Seth comes into town, he all of a sudden changes his will, and that's where the schmarmy attorney comes in. Because he knows about that. The guy's name's Franklin. In his will, he said in order for Seth to get his inheritance, Seth and Leah had to get married after 1 year.
Being that this is like a Christian... You said this is a Christian fiction? How heavy or how light is it on, like... And then they went to church. Is that like as light as it gets? Because it's Sunday. And and then they made out in the parsonage or something. How much does it go into the fact that it's a Christian book versus, like, would someone accidentally read this and never catch on that it's a Christian book?
No, you wouldn't be able to read this and never catch on. Okay. It starts out at the very beginning before the first chapter with Zephaniah 3:17. The Lord thy God in the midst of thee is mighty. He will save. He will rejoice over thee with joy. He will rest in his love. He will joy over thee with singing. And that verse actually is in that word.
Itinerated.
Yes, there we go. Yes, it comes throughout.
It's a part of the story.
It's a part of the story. Yes, and she has a really good friend that is one of the ones that she's an auntie to the little kids, and this friend has a bunch of Bible verses on note cards that she always carries around with her and really tries to memorize them. And so they bring that into the story, and she's giving her, when she's talking about why am I always crying, she's like, maybe God just is giving you a moment to you need to just sit and rest. Like, you're always doing all this stuff for everybody else, but he's having you be extra emotional right now because you need to sit and rest in God's presence.
So what do you like about this series specifically? Like you said, this is is it your favorite?
I like the way the author writes. It's easy to understand and easy to get through. She doesn't use big words that I don't understand, even though I'm a professor. Don't let that fool you. Please don't let that fool you.
Were you, in fact, as a professor, in the middle of other things that you really probably should have been reading?
Oh,
this
absolutely.
is actually fun stuff for you.
Absolutely.
Were you half tempted to just bring in the textbook you assigned your students?
Oh, absolutely not.
We have had somebody say they were going to do that before. They did not, but that has been a potential thing that was going to happen.
No. I really actually enjoyed being able to just pick up a book off of my bookshelf.
Oh, good.
I have a lot of them. I don't take the time to read anymore like I used to. So I really liked this assignment, if you will.
Good. That's
so
good.
that I could get into it and just take that time to just, escape to another world. That's exactly what reading is, you know? And it's awesome in that way. So I appreciated that.
I love that moment when I can get lost in a book and I'm no longer reading, but I'm just experiencing the story. And I can never really catch myself in that gray space in between. Like, I really enjoyed that I can just get so lost in a book that I'm just experiencing it, that my mind can just paint that picture, and I'm really just watching it like a movie. So I think, like what you were saying, you probably experienced that with this book.
Absolutely. Well, and I've been able to visit Oregon. I love Oregon. I think it's beautiful, and they go hiking in the mountains and stuff. Not a hiker.
So this is a series that you've read. How many books in this series?
10. We'll go with that. I think it has 10, and I've read all of them. I have all of them.
So, and this is a series of series. So how many books total would you say of those?
I think total there's probably 23.
So this is a very long series. You've gotten to know the characters through the different volumes in it. Would you say your joy of the series grows as it gets bigger, or do you enjoy when they kind of just focus in on one person in particular and kind of leave the rest of the world behind?
Oh, okay.
I like that they do choose to talk more about some of these underlying characters and develop their storylines. Because when you hear about these random characters at the beginning of the series, 22 books earlier or whatever it might be, but I want to know more about that person. Let's learn more about it. So I do appreciate that it has expanded throughout the whole series, like series of series, and that they do concentrate on the smaller characters.
Okay, so everything about this is good then. That's the key thing about really, really long series is, you can do both. Okay.
I know you guys will never pick this up.
You should really
You're
take
never
it.
going to want to read it. That's okay.
Well,
it's okay.
The fun of this series is, aside from this, I'm probably not going to read the stuff Bryce mentioned the past couple episodes.
Okay.
This was a rarity. I don't think he's going to read mine.
Okay.
I'll try to get him to read it because it's amazing, but I don't expect that ever. This is to broaden and hear what other people are reading, so don't worry about that a bit. This is a perspective we haven't had on the show yet.
Okay.
That's the value of it.
Cool.
My book this month, which I am extremely excited by, is The Ionian Mission by Patrick O'Brian. This month, I had a bit of a slump where I started 4 books, and I hated all of them within 30 pages. Aww. Yeah, I started one book, didn't like it, started another book, hated it, and just stopped. And I thought, you know what? I've got a book I've been saving, because it's in a series I know I like, so I'm just going to break the slump with a book I know I'm going to enjoy, and it was wonderful.
So this is part of a series as well?
Yeah, this is book 8 out of 20 of the Aubrey and Maturin series.
So that beats the Woodlands already.
It's a book I haven't read yet. I'm just waiting and saving them for when I can. Although I will say I was very bad in that I read this one and then he said, you know what, I've got the next one. Let's just dive into that one too. This is a great series. Patrick O'Brian, it's the Aubrey Maturin series, which is where Master and Commander Far Side of the World comes from. Okay. Master and Commander is the first book in the series, and Far Side of the World is the 10th book in the series. So what do? Put them together to make a movie.
You mean of Russell Crowe fame?
Of Russell Crowe fame, yeah. Russell Crowe plays Jack, and Jack Aubrey is a captain in the Napoleonic Wars. He is captain of a whole bunch of different ships because he rotates around in different ships. And Stephen Maturin, this is going great. Steve Maturin is Steve Maturin did it again. Shoot, I'm on a first name basis with this guy. Yeah. Stephen Maturin is a ship surgeon who almost always serves under Jack Aubrey on one of his ships, and they've got a really close friendship. They really get along with each other. The neatest thing about this series to me is how good of a writer Patrick O'Brian is, because he writes in the style of the time he's writing about. His favorite author is Jane Austen. And he's able to really get that style pitch perfect. Like, his word choice is perfect. The way he has people talk to each other is period perfect. Everything. It's just absolutely perfect. This book was published in 1981. So to be able to get a style that's over 100 years earlier is just amazing. And what's even more impressive beyond that is he's able to still make it completely understandable. Like, at no point are you really trying to figure out exactly what's going on, despite the fact that he never explains anything. This book takes place almost entirely on naval warships, and he doesn't explain terms much beyond the first book. He uses as much jargon as he can, and he doesn't bother explaining them, and it doesn't affect the story and how well you can understand what's going on. His writing is just that good. Where this is really impressive is when he does naval combat, because it's all about positioning and it's all about tides and being able to keep the wind in the right places. And despite him using all this jargon, the fights are still exciting, the fights still make sense, and you still understand positioning around everybody. He's just an incredible author. Which brings me to one reason I love this book so much. His naval fights are the best thing he does, and he makes you wait for him in this book. And it's such a hard wait. The first naval fight that really happens is the last thing in the book. What? The book literally ends at the very end of a naval fight. And what makes it even harder is the way the book opens. It opens with Jack Aubrey being given a brand new ship. Jack Aubrey he's a fighting captain. If there's a chance for a fight, he's going to take it. I mean, he just lives for the fight. He's trying to get his men prize money, because if they get the ship, they get lots of money. He's trying to bring down Napoleon. He's got all these reasons to fight, and he's a fighting captain. But he wants to train his men to use the guns really well, and that takes a lot of gunpowder, so he buys extra. And at the beginning of the book, he buys a whole bunch of gunpowder from the widow of a fireworks manufacturer. So when they do gunnery practice, there's these big white explosions and like green crackling all around them, and there's blue smoke and like super loud noises and so on. At one point, they're about to attack a French ship, and the French see these, boom, and they just take off and get away from them before they can attack them.
That's fantastic.
So that's going on through this whole book, and there's no fights for almost the whole thing. It is so frustrating, and he makes you wait for it, and just it grows and grows. And there are so many times where you think they're about to fight. Like, at one point, Jack Aubrey has been ordered not to fire first. He's on a diplomatic mission, so he brings his ship and he goes into the French harbor, kind of goes further in the harbor, goes past all the warships. Nobody's firing at him because they've also been ordered not to fire first. Then he comes back out of the harbor and goes back out to sea because nobody shot at him. This book just makes you want that fight so badly. And there's still an overarching story. It's not just fights, but that was my favorite thing about this book, was it made you wait for the thing I wanted the most.
So you appreciated the fact that it drove you crazy to wait for it.
Well, if I had gotten my fight on the first couple pages, it would have been fun,
right?
But it wouldn't have been as special. And he ends with such a great fight. I mean, he writes... When some people write a fight scene, it's just, I hit him with my sword, I dodged his sword, I killed him. He puts a lot of really good thought into how things work, and just manages to make everything just exciting and thrilling. The pages just turn themselves when he does a fight scene. He's so good at it.
I was going to say, the way I'm imagining it is, and then the cannon went boom! And boom is all in capital letters. So he really just paints a beautiful photo.
Oh, he's fantastic.
Right? So is he also that good at the non-fighting scenes, like describing, I guess, the voyage?
Oh,
and
he
stuff
is.
As well?
He absolutely is. He does characters really well. And the characters have had 8 books to grow. Jack Aubrey, for example, is an incredibly great sea captain, but he's an absolute idiot on land. He is just
his legs wobble
hopeless.
because he's not used to...
Yeah, that's exactly right. Well, no, he just doesn't know how to interact with his wife, his family, his wife's family. He's always being taken in by con men, and he can't for the life of him build good relationships with the people over him politically to be able to advance his career. He's completely hopeless on land. Put him on a boat, he's fantastic. But he's awful.
For England, then?
Yeah, right? He's an English captain, yeah.
So when he encounters the French boat, was there ever like a white boat, then like a strawberry boat, and then a chocolate boat? Because you said they were Neapolitan.
Napoleon.
Oh,
Napoleon.
Napoleon.
You're close,
Darn.
you're close, yeah. Another thing that we have in common, Jack Aubrey enjoys puns. At any opportunity he can, he will take the time to tell a story of a pun that his friends Stephen Materne told like 5 books ago. I've heard this story maybe 6 times throughout the series so far. It's the story of this one pun that his friend said before. And it's just, he kind of builds that reality of being around this really kind of silly but really good captain.
That's interesting because there's only one scene in the entire Master and Commander movie I remember.
No.
And it was a pun.
Yeah,
and
they're all through the series.
They had like bread rolls or something like that, and there were things called weevils, like the little worms that eat them. It's like, you have one that has a lot of weevils in it, and you have another roll that has, not as many. Mm-hmm. It's like, which one do you choose? He says, you choose the lesser of 2 weevils. That's the only thing I remember from the movie.
That is the kind of humor. I mean, for being dignified Regency-era fiction, there are puns everywhere. I mean, he does that so well. And it's not like he's reveling in them. I mean, he knows they're bad, but that's part of the fun. And he writes the second character who is a bit more of an introvert, which is why I talk about him less, I suppose, which is Stephen Materne. He's the
surgeon, you said?
Yeah, he's a surgeon. He's also a spy for England against the French. So that'll be 3 books in a row that have had spies in them I've done for this podcast, I guess. Wasn't intentional.
Wait, if he's on the English boat, how do they not know he works for England?
Well, you see, he's very good at disguise, and he gets dropped off at various places while they're in port. He goes and does a mission, then he comes back to the boat. The spy work kind of comes into the end of this book. They go on a diplomatic mission to figure out which of the various Arab rulers around a very strategic location they should give guns to. And that kind of sets a lot of the stuff that leads to a final huge fight in motion at the end of it. But it's a really great series. He writes everything well, and he manages to put so much history in it. Almost everything that happens in these books happened in some way, but in some cases he's toned it down to make it more realistic. There have been a few cases where he'll report on something that actually happened in the same way, but he has cut down the numbers or made it just a little bit less one-sided or that kind of thing to make it have that air of verisimilitude as opposed to what actually happened. Because some of the stuff these guys did was just so crazy.
Now you were saying this is number 8 of 20?
Yes.
Would I have to read the first 7 in order to understand? Like, if I just picked up number 8, would I know what's happening?
He doesn't really stop to explain much in the first book either.
Fair enough.
I mean, there's a little bit, because that's Stephen Materne is not a sailor at all. He's the opposite of Jack Aubrey. He's completely hopeless on a boat. He's fallen off of ships, like, almost every single book. It happens so often. It's crazy. And the first book, they kind of, and here's the mizzenmast. But aside from that, you could probably just dive any one of them. Although, I wouldn't recommend it, though, because the characters do grow and change in their relationships. Like, they've both gotten married since the series started. Both of them have risen in position since the series started. So if you want to see the growth of the characters and see how they've kind of gained higher position, that's a bit fun to be able to read.
Huh, okay. Nice. Like, the same question I asked Steph, what is something you didn't like about this book? If there was anything.
Well, this is a complaint I have about the series on a whole, is... In the opening of every book that I have, I'm showing the microphone a diagram of a square-rigged ship. They have this diagram, and it has all the sails on the ship listed, and that's about it for explanation.
Oh.
So if you really, really want to get into the naval terms and figure out what things mean, I have another book for that, thankfully. In some ways, it's not a negative, but it can be a little frustrating for somebody to use a term that you don't know. It doesn't change how much I enjoy the series. It doesn't show a lack in the book. It shows a lack in me, for not knowing these words.
Well, I was going to say, did you find it difficult when he would use like the naval terms like that? Not just like the different sails or anything like that, but did it take away from the story because you...
Oh, no, not a bit, not a bit. It's sort of like with science fiction. In science fiction, or at least really good science fiction, you can throw out terms and not explain them.
Okay.
Because that's just building the world. It's like a lightsaber. Nobody went and said, oh, and here's how a lightsaber works during the movies. The Millennium Falcon has a hyperdrive. We don't explain what a hyperdrive does. We don't explain how the Death Star laser works, for example. Those are just things that are part of the world.
Or why there was a hole that a laser didn't be shot into.
We don't need to know what a Wookiee is during Star Wars. That's all expanded universe stuff. And we don't need to know that stuff during this book either to enjoy it. That's just, you're aware there's more of a world around you than just what's happening in the narrative.
Fair enough. Okay.
It's still annoying, though, to not know these words, but it doesn't affect the story. It doesn't affect how much I enjoy the story.
Right, okay.
So what's your favorite word that you read or came across?
Gosh.
Was it was gosh? Really?
That's
it was gosh.
Wow,
I've never heard it before.
Mm-hmm.
This one's another pun. The puns are what stick out the most to me because they're just delightful. And this is the pun that Jack Aubrey tells everybody at any possible time he can. The dog watch. Dog watch is, there's different watches on a ship, different scheduled times where you're on duty, basically. And the dog watch, I believe, are the ones that are at night, and they're a little bit shorter. People are saying, well, why is it a dog watch? And Maturin says, well, because they're curtailed. And cur is an old archaic term for dog. So it's actually a really clever pun, but it's still an awful pun. That doesn't go away from it. So I think dog watch is, just for the sake of that terrible pun, is probably my favorite term.
I wonder if Patrick O'Brien thought, gee, I don't know if they got the joke the last time I said it. I better put it back in.
There could be a little bit of that as well. That certainly could be part of it. But the ability to put us in a period piece written years before he was born is just amazing, and it's such a flavorful, exciting, fun world to be in, and the series just rackets and rackets and rackets. It doesn't feel like it's 20 books long. I mean, every time I read one of these books, it just feels like it's gone and by in a flash. It's such a great series.
All right, that'll do it for this episode of Book Reports Podcast. I want to say a special thank you to you, Stephanie, for joining us for reading a book.
Yes, thank you, Stephanie.
Thanks
for reading a book.
Yes, thank you
Nice
for allowing me to.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you very much for putting up with us and for letting us put up with you.
That actually was probably harder for you guys to put up with me.
You taught us how to whistle. No downside.
Right? Exactly.
Oh, man, that's great. Listeners, if you would like to hear more of our episodes, you can find us on SoundCloud and iTunes. Be sure to rate our episodes, hopefully in a positive
more ratings help people find us.
Yeah, either way,
Lower ratings, less people find us.
You can find us on Facebook at facebook.com/Book Reports Podcast. We update you on any information when the episodes come out, so you definitely want to find us on there, get all the updates, and let us know. You can get into contact with us. Let us know if there's a book you want us to read, or what you like about the episodes, what you don't like, what you want us to maybe add or take away. Sam's blog is skullduggeryinthesmoke.blogspot.com if you want to contact him or read any of his posts. Do you post, is it once a week or once a month?
I post every week on Friday.
So if you don't get enough Sam from these episodes...
If you don't want to hear the sound of my voice but want to hear what I have to say, the blog is for that.
If you like what he's saying but not the way he's saying
If my inflection bothers you is what I mean.
Welcome to Book
Reports Podcast.
And finally, you can get a hold of us by email at bookreportspodcast@gmail.com. That's all one word. I want to say a special thank you to Kevin MacLeod for creating our theme song, and we will see you next episode.
No, my cats are Flynn and Bingley.
Bingley?
Bingley.
I think you're going to have to get behind that one now. Why Bingley?
Well,
someone else had Googly and you're more a fan of Bingley?
Big fan of Bing Crosby and Jet Li. She couldn't decide between the two, so she put them together.
Wait, what was the first name?
Bingley. Flynn Rider.
Okay, yeah.
Makes sense.
Yeah, and Bingley. Bingley used to have a brother named Darcy.
Oh, okay, that makes sense now.
Are we getting any connection there from a literary background?
Harry Potter.
Both characters from Pride and Prejudice.
Thank
it's
you.
It's a book written by Jane Austen, one of your favorite authors.
But not J.K. Rowling, so I'm not going to get it.
They're also in the Harry Potter series.
Oh, okay, those guys.
Yes. Bingley and Darcy. So Darcy is no more as of a couple years ago, and so Bingley and Flynn now fight.
Is that how it happens in the book too?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
I've never read Pride and Prejudice.
Yep, that's totally
haven't you, Bryce? Haven't you?